So we're here today at Bodhi Monastery, which is a Theravada forest monastery and retreat centre where Venerable Pannyavaro is the abbot. And the monastery is situated 7 kilometres from the major town of Lismore, about 40 kilometres from the well-known town of Byron Bay, and is accessed very easily by road from various places and also by flight. The nearest airport is at Lismore and also at Ballina. So there's various ways in which people can access this lovely monastery. So Venerable Pannyavaro, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Good.
And if we can ask a few questions about your journey into Buddhism, becoming a Buddhist monk, and especially establishing this monastery here, Bodhi Forest Monastery. So obviously a long history of being a Buddhist monk, but prior to that, you had an interest in Buddhism meditation.
I had first contact with any Buddhist at all through books. This was about late 60s. I was a student in Melbourne, and I happened to be in Tasmania, the island of Tasmania, walked into a library and came across some old books on Buddhism, including the classic, the Dhammapada, the Path of the Buddha, and immediately I almost had a conversion experience.
Wow.
And I wanted to be a monk then. Of course, I think I'm a bit vague on years and time, but I would say it was about 65, 66. And other than a few Buddhist centres in Melbourne and Sydney, there was no Buddhist monasteries or temples except for the Buddhist societies of Melbourne and Sydney, and there was partly one in Brisbane as well. So there was no opportunity, although I came from England. I'm not English, I would emphasise, my family's not English, but anyway, I came through on the SS Strathnada in 1957 and landed in Fremantle, Western Australia, Perth, and then made my way eventually down to Melbourne, and I was a student there. And this is when I was picking fruit, as they do, to get your living, as a student. I came across the Buddhist literature, and immediately I felt connected there. Now, I couldn't pursue it until probably in 72, when the first resident Buddhist monk came to Australia, an Englishman, Pt.1, and I was involved with him.
So that was at Wat Buddha Rangzi in Sydney?
No, that was before that. There wasn't a Wat Buddha Rangzi. The first time monks were renting a house somewhere in Sydney suburb, but in what was then Chinatown in Dixon Street, there was a Chinese Buddhist temple.
Right.
And that's where all the early Buddhists met. And that's where I met Pt.1 and got involved with him and others there. That would be 72, I think, 73, something like that.
And from then, did you connect with him at Wat Buddha Dharma?
Yes.
In the early days there at Wiseman's Ferry?
Yes. I was involved with Ilse Gert and Ilse Lederman. Ilse became a Buddhist nun, Ayakema, and when they sold that property up in central Queensland, inland from Nambour, Obi, they purchased what became Wat Buddha Dharma, 250 acres in the Daroog National Park, and Ilse Lederman, as she was then, set up donated the land, and Kantipalo, who was a pioneer monk, he was the first really major monk in Australia, set up Wat Buddha Dharma at Monastery outside of Sydney.
So you spent time visiting there, doing retreats?
I was probably one of the first. I was a lay person at the time, so I helped to work at place there, and organised retreats and that sort of thing.
So, and also your and my association goes back to those early days as well. So I would have met you probably 1981, end of 81 or 82, when you were visiting there, and then later on I went off to Thailand, having ordained as a monk, and then you ordained as a monk.
I ordained first in Sri Lanka,
right,
at Mitrigala, on the recommendation of Prakantipalo, and Mitrigala was a forest monastery that combined the forest tradition with the Vipassana insight meditation, and I ordained there first. That was 84.
Right, yeah.
And then it was good conditions, but difficult for Westerners. The hygiene, and while they're very generous with the, in fact there was 2-year waiting list to make offerings of dana, of food, but most of us was, because of the climate, hygiene and diet, most of I spent my time being sick there, in the jungle. It was quite difficult there. Of course the local monks didn't bother, but Western monks had difficulty. So subsequently I came back and I met up with a Burmese master, Sayadaw U Pandita, where we did a 1-month retreat in the Lower Blue Mountains. That would be about 85 I think. And then after that I followed over, he invited me to Mahasi in Rangoon, but it was difficult to get a visa in those early days.
Sure, yeah.
I waited 9 months in Bangkok, at Wat Pt.1. I was actually a seminara, and Sayadaw U Pandita asked me to come and ordain with him in Rangoon. But I waited for 9 months, and so I was pressured to ordain high ordination, which I did at Wat Pt.1 with Somdet Yan, who became the Sangharaj. Yeah. So and then after that I went up to Ajahn Mabur, but I was really entrenched in the Satipatthana Vipassana practice, because 10 years previously I'd actually practiced in India, and that was my first contact in 74, when our friend here, Christine, also in the Burmese temple in Varanasi, I did a month retreat, but there was also 10 days with Goenkaji. So that was my first formal practice in India. So I was committed to that practice, and eventually, after about a year, I was able to go to Burma, Rangoon, at the Mahasi Yukta, and spent 1 year there, solid, which was unusual in those days. You could get 3 months, but so I spent a full year there until the visas weren't available anymore. And over 5 years, I would go in and out. I'd go to Penang, the Malaysian Buddhist Meditation Centre there, and the Western monks would go and rest there and recuperate. And then we'd go back for another 3 months, 6 months, and that's how it was, back and forth like that for about 5 years. In 89, I invited my teacher, Sayadaw U Janaka, Chamye Yekta, Chamye Sayadaw, to Australia. So this Burmese master, Sayadaw, Chamye Sayadaw, came to Australia for 6 months. So I organised that and toured him around. We had a month at what Buddha Dharma Monastery in Canberra, 10 days in Adelaide, even up where we are now at Mount Warning Lodge, a 10-day retreat here. And some of those people who came to that retreat still I'm in contact with and come here.
Great.
So you often find there's a connectivity. You know, like I wouldn't have known that Christine sitting here we would have done the same course, beginner's course in '74. I've always found that, you know, you have some connection with whoever you meet along the way, in the Dharma anyway. So that's a bit of my potted history.
And time in Sydney, teaching at the Buddhist Library and having a little centre in Surrey Hills.
Yeah, I was there for 10 years, and and teaching up the Blue Mountains, Blue Mountains Insight Meditation Centre there, giving retreats, classes in the Buddhist Library in the city, Campbelltown. But I also, because I had to organise my teacher to come over here, I then had to create an organisation to sponsor him, and that became the Buddha Dharma Meditation Association, and also because that's when computers become available for lay people, for everybody. So I started to use computers, Yum Chars we call them, IBM compatibles. A pretty basic machine, but and I set up a BuddhaNet as a BBS, a bulletin board system, prior to the internet. Called it BuddhaNet, and then 92-3, I had a friend at the University of Western Sydney at Richmond campus. He said, "Oh, are you interested in the internet, the web? You like to build a website?" Well, I didn't really know what he was talking about, but at the Western University, they gave me space and sorted it out as I went along.
Wonderful.
And that was BuddhaNet.net. So we've been going now, still going, still up there. I'll give you a plug if you like, www.buddhanet.net. And we're nearly sort of 25 years at it, you know.
So a great resource of information for people all over the world.
It's a major resource, especially on the educational side of it. And I developed a World Buddhist History because a lot of people only know as a Buddha as a statue, have no idea of the context or the development of how Buddhism spread over different countries, the different traditions, different cultures and practices. So that was quite comprehensive. It also became a CD available, it's online. And then I put things like, and then I developed a World Buddhist Directory coming from first centres in Australia, and I made websites for them, little websites. That time we were cutting edge, if you like, and so BuddhaNet has become the major Buddhist content creator.
So when did the idea of having a forest monastery first come to you?
It's always been in my mind. In fact, that's really what I was hoped to would eventuate. I had a couple of abortive attempts, one in Wollongong, it didn't happen, out of my control. So when I lost the land that was offered in Wollongong, having spent a year setting it up, then I had to walk away from that. And in 2005, I came up here and we had a meeting. And at the very first meeting, one of the people involved there in this group in Lismore offered the land that we're on now, 95 acres or 36.91 hectares. Drew Andrews, he offered it, part of the land, 80 acres, and he was going to keep the existing house and about 10 acres. But after my experience in Wollongong, when we had no legal hold on the land, we had to arrange some base that we had legal title to it. And after negotiating for about a year, it wasn't very difficult with lawyers and the rest of it, but eventually Drew's father had cancer, so he was prepared to sell it. So I said, I'll buy it, we'll buy it. Had no money.
There's some good karma and merit for Drew.
Yeah, so, it seemed to me very ideal. It looked pretty rough. It was, degraded land. Look, even the neighbours said it was all weeds all over the place, as it was. It was a mess, really. Hadn't been, run a few cattle. It was about for many years. So I was able to raise the first 60,000, but I needed the deposit to go to the bank, so I needed another 20 minimum just to get the deposit. And I happened to be then teaching in Penang, Malaysia, and I spoke to the abbot there, Reverend Wewu, and he was interested in what we were doing, and I said, well, I have to go to the bank. He said, don't do that. We will give you a loan to pay for the land. So we had 340,000 he put in the bank with no record, no papers around it. And I did, so we were able to purchase the land outright.
Very good.
So there's no mortgage on the place, but I had a debt to this monk, 340,000. And I had some income from a Singapore temple, which fell through. So I had to turn around and say, well, I haven't got any income to pay you now. I'll try, but he said, don't worry about it. The Tan Sien temple in Penang has paid the loan that was given to me from them. So now we've secured the land, and I've put a covenant on it that it's for Theravada Buddhist practice, and it can't be used legally. So when I fall off the twig, as it will happen, it will carry on as a Buddhist retreat centre.
Very good.
Legally. Very important.
So what else is your vision for Bodhi Monastery?
Well, my purpose, my aim, vision if you like, is to have a long-term Satipatthana Vipassana retreat centre where meditators come and our service are on a donation basis or free. Because from our tradition, the early Buddhist tradition, first it is based on generosity. We call it dana. So we don't charge. And since we've been here 12 years, we've never charged for anything at all. But we need to build a retreat complex, purpose-built complex for the practitioners here. And first we had to negotiate the development application, the permission to build, and I'm sure you're familiar how difficult that would be over 2 years. Fortunately, I had well, he's actually an industrial designer, Mark Halford, and the key person to get the permission, the development application through, was Ian McIntosh, a town planner. So he can help us with all the regulations and business. So eventually we got it through. Of course, you always have somebody opposition, but we worked that through with him. So we've got permission to build a retreat complex of 44 meditators in individual accommodation, commercial kitchen, a large hall, amenities block, up on this land, up on what we call the plateau, which is a hill here. And now we have started the first stage, all but finished the first stage, which is a Sema hall, where monks can be ordained or do their business, but it will, for the time being, until we have the major Vipassana, it will be multi-purpose hall. And then we've built also a 2-bedroom accommodation for disabled with ensuite. And there'll be accommodation for 44 meditators in single rooms, and the whole complex up there. That's it. And today I've just come down, working concrete up there, buckets of concrete. We're building a pagoda, which is second stage. The slab and the plinth. And we had to pour concrete in the better blocks, foundations, and the rest. And also we've been donated on that pagoda, it's been donated from Myanmar. It's actually made out of stainless steel, which is unusual. Gold-plated stainless steel, and it will hopefully all arrive in the last week in January 2019. But and also today, did the formwork for concrete slab for a statue, which has been donated by the Vietnamese Buddhist community in Sydney. It's a 5-ton white marble statue.
And also you've done a huge amount of planting of rainforest trees over the many years. And
since we've been here, well, it was necessary. The place was such a mess. So to clean it up, we a lot of invasive weeds and trees, lantana, privet, and camphor laurel, that's infested all this area up on the north coast. The original rainforest, which the locals call the Big Scrub, it extended up to the Gold Coast and south towards Coffs Harbour. And Lismore, or this area here, is the western edge of that Big Scrub, lowland, subtropical rainforest. So fortunately there's a nursery here that grows seedlings. So in the time we've been here, in say 11 years really, apart from all the clearing, we've planted 8,000 trees and shrubs. And part of that, about 7,000 would be rainforests, endemic local rainforest trees. So we're restoring the original rainforest here that was cleared 200 years ago. And of that original big scrub or lowland rainforest, 1% or less has survived.
So a real gift to the planet.
It's a planet, yeah.
In all that we've done there.
Most definitely, with climate damage, change you can call it. Change doesn't have to be create damage, but it's what's happening through, since the Industrial Revolution. People now are starting to feel the effects. We used to go out 5-6 years ago, you could work in the sun like the mad dogs and Englishmen, if I may say. You could go out there and work now it's too hot to get out there. It's burning, to be out there in the midday sun. So higher temperatures. Yes, and years ago I was in India, in a place, Pondicherry, an ashram there, Sri Aurobindo ashram, and they had planted, it was mostly paddy fields, denuded of any, very little vegetation. And they had planted a lot of trees, and it created a microclimate. I can't recall it. This was about 73. I was in India with that, 74, and it changed the climate.
Yeah, wow.
So this is even though we're only 95 acres, it's possible we've it's only a dot on the planet. It's only hardly 100 acres. We could help to save the planet, and that's what we're doing. So we've planted local rainforest trees, but also fruit and nut trees. Bunya pines, pecan nuts, a lot of citrus, a lot of tropical fruit trees, about 200 or 300 of those. And there is surviving wildlife here. In fact, this land here is called Tullera. The area is called Tullera, the region, and actually it's an Aboriginal derived term from Tularoo, which means place of many birds. So since we've been here, we've spotted, well, just recently 100 different species.
Amazing.
So this place of many birds is thriving. It's become a sanctuary for the fauna, the wildlife, and also, you know, the vegetation, reforesting. Mostly revegetating because the land was all cleared pretty much. So we're revegetation, and we're just putting another 1,000 trees in. In fact, yesterday, before you came, we planted another 96 trees of the, you know, so.
So creating a sanctuary for wildlife, so trees and wildlife, and also for human beings.
Yes, because in 2017, we had an event, a one-day event on, we could call it forest therapy. And this was the local Lismore Council funded it, and it was for carers, and they spent a day here, and yeah, connecting up with nature and the bush, with, you know, the forest. And that's what's happening. People are dissociated, disconnected with nature. And the Buddha said the ideal situation for a meditator is to go into the forest and sit at the base of a tree, you know.
Go into
natural.
Find your nature.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to a meeting a couple of weeks' time in Lismore, and there's a group of people who are interested in promoting this idea of feel blue, touch green. You know, bring people, especially urban people, to come out and experience nature. So there you go.
Where is your favourite place in the monastery?
Well, we have a rock pool here, and we built a pavilion there. If you'd seen it when we first came, you'd only see the invasive trees, camphors. It was just covered in lantana. People from this area would know lantana. It's sort of an introduced invasive bush. And so we cleared all that and replanted it, and the camphor laurel trees were taken out, and now you wouldn't know, you know, that's all, because this land is very fertile. In fact, it's high maintenance country, you know. I'm a working monk. Anyone who comes here has to work. It's part of but we don't charge anything, you know. So, and we're doing restoration work help the planet along. One thing that helps, I think, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have a lot of knowledge about things. It's just a doing with some common sense, which is not so common. But being persistent, you know, that's something is quite rare too. Yeah. People who can stay with things, you know, follow things through, and have the resilience to be with it, because it's not easy, is it? You have your ups and downs. But if you can maintain in Buddhist practice more equanimity and coming from non-reactive awareness, things will happen, you know. But the hardest thing what I've been challenged through is having patience. Right. I'm not naturally a patient person. I want to do things yesterday. So that's you know, like the building up here, because we haven't the cash to just go and order the things. We just have to wait on the good graces of the builder, and as we have money, we build along. So it's quite a long haul.